Welcome to Something More Human. I'm Sam.
And I'm Elliot. We're a married couple exploring human connection and its impact on ours, our guests, and our listeners' lives.
Join us in creating something more human. Elliot and I just got back from a 3-week trip in Europe that we want to reflect a little bit on, call back to a couple of previous episodes, and get a little raw on some of the challenges that we faced.
I also want to tell people that, no, we're not going to just go through every single day like, oh, we ate food here and then we did that, and that was really fun. Like, no, you saw that on the internet, you can see that on Instagram. Like, we're going to talk about just like some of the things we noticed immediately upon like arriving and just existing there. And obviously, like, I feel like I have to say it over and over, but like, clearly I'm not saying that we know everything there is to know about living in Europe. We know next to nothing, but just talking about our personal experiences and our physical experience in Europe and how that affected our perspective, our worldview on America, on living here.
Also adding the disclaimer that this is our personal experience from a 3-week trip, and a lot of it is intangible and subjective. So take all of that with a grain of salt, but we do want to peel back the curtain a bit on what it was like spending 500 plus hours completely together. And we do spend a lot of time together in our day-to-day lives, but not that much time.
Yeah, we pretty much didn't have any alone time at all together. I know that one of our friends was like, you on one day you should do something alone, and then the other, obviously you both should do something alone on a day, just see how that goes. Mm-hmm. I think that we were open to it. That just didn't actually really happen. But I think that we had a great time.
You posed this question to me around how can we make our trips more meaningful and tie them to people rather than just, eating and drinking, which of course we love to do in a new place. Mm-hmm. And how can we really build these connections that make our trips more memorable, more meaningful? How did we do?
I think we did good. First, I want to say, I feel like that's that fear of, like, as people, get to know us, like, I feel like that is almost like a fear of missing out for me, because you always say, and I always harp on it too, like it's hard for me to be present. I'm always like wishing that I, was somewhere else or had something else.
Sure.
And so I was thinking, how could our vacations be better? Like, all we do is eat and drink, which isn't necessarily true. Like, we do a lot of sightseeing and museum visiting and all those things, but I'm always thinking that it could be better when, like, in reality, 3 weeks in Europe with each other, like, how much better could it get just doing that, With that being said, I feel like we did a great job. I mean, we obviously, we'll talk about, we were able to hang out with 4 different people, 2 different couples, mm-hmm. while in Europe in the middle of our vacation, which we thought was a really nice, I don't think reprieve's a good word, just it was right in the middle of our 3-week vacation. And I felt like it was perfect timing. We started it alone, we had the middle with friends, and then we ended it alone. And I like the way that it worked out.
I think what was unique about this trip in terms of connection is we leveraged our network in a way that we never have before. And we actually leveraged it in 2 different ways. One way is we already have friends. They're living in Germany and they were able to meet us in Vienna. Like you mentioned, it was kind of a nice reprieve is a funny way of saying it, but a break in how we were spending our time right in the middle of our trip with people we already know, and also hanging out with people who aren't just each other. Mm-hmm. And then we were also able to leverage Mel in our network, who you all know from a previous episode. She knows a couple in Vienna, and we were able to meet up with them and be totally strangers at first. And that felt really special to make friends with basically total strangers without mm-hmm. that kind of awkward, like, we're out in the world, should we go talk to those people over there? It was a little bit more structured.
Yeah, I feel like, maybe we didn't do exactly what we wanted to do, what we set out to do. But I feel like just in that way, like, we went out of our comfort zones because, like, we had to walk 20 minutes to meet them in front of a busy subway, mm-hmm. in front of a busy station. And we had no idea how it was going to go. We didn't know them. Like, is it going to be fun? We're going out to eat. Like, is this going to be awkward? So we were completely strangers. But I feel like by the end of that night, by the end of that conversation at dinner, like, I felt like they were friends of ours. And then the next day we spent more time with him. Mm-hmm. And even just in 2 days, I feel like there's some of our close friends, yeah. which is cool to think about, because it was really only a matter of like maybe 6 or 8 total hours spent together. Mm-hmm. And I know we'll probably talk more about it, but it was cool that we got to hang out with people, Americans who now live in Germany, and their unique perspective. And then these folks, one of them being he grew up.
He's Austrian.
He's Austrian, and he grew up in Vienna, and so he knows about life in Vienna. And she is from America, now lives in Vienna. So like so many different perspectives that I thought was made for really like rich and complex conversation. So I'm glad that we did that.
Yeah, I think that this funny like awkwardness about adult friend dating feels very similar to real life dating, which is we don't know each other. It might be awkward. Are we gonna hit it off? What happens if we don't? And just doing it, just taking action. And if you don't vibe, what have you lost? A few hours? You know what I mean? But like, what do you have to gain if you do vibe?
That's true. And I think we had a lot to gain. They were very, very kind to us, and they took us to basically this, one of the tallest points around Vienna, and we were able to see Vienna from above, basically. And that was breathtaking. Like that was one of the most beautiful sceneries that I think we saw in Europe. And I think that that wouldn't have happened had we not hung out with them, had we not said yes.
Yeah.
So that was pretty special. I definitely won't forget that.
Another strategy that we talked about ahead of taking this trip was, you mentioned, I think you probably saw TikTok about establishing habit or routine in a new place. And I think as we reflect on how meaningful coffee shops are in our lives and how actually they play a ginormous role in some of the most meaningful connections that we have, we didn't lean into that as much as I think we could have, but we did lean into it to some degree.
I think we did, yeah.
And one that really sticks out to me is also in Vienna, going to a taco place, just chatting with the owner. She was so sweet. She was so welcoming. She was very easy to talk to. And we caught her at a time when her small business was at its 3-year anniversary and found out that she sources all of the ingredients as locally as possible. She hand grinds the corn, which is...
And you can see her doing it.
Yes, which is amazing.
We talked about like, wanting to frequent the same places to feel like we were part of the community, right? Like 3, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 times, because we spent, about that amount of days in each place that we were in. And we didn't do exactly that, but we did not. Like we went back to a few coffee shops several times. And I thought we could check that off our list, because we were able to do that. And where did we go? Twice? We went to the Miners. We went to 2 different locations of the Miners, right?
We went to Emma twice.
We went to Emma twice, and then the restaurant that we really, really liked a lot, the breakfast shop in Budapest, Horizon. We went there 2 days in a row. And I felt like even then, like we saw a couple of the same people, and they seemed happy to see us, and that felt good to go to the same place. I think that's also like where the fear of missing out thing comes in, because like when you're on vacation, like you want to hit as many things as possible, and that no matter what you do, you're not gonna be able to see everything. But there's also something to be said for having that experience where you feel, I mean, I know it's saying like you feel at home is super corny, but in a way, like there's some familiarity there.
Yes.
And that feels nice.
Yeah, I think that what inspired me coming home from that specific strategy is moving to a new city. We've been doing this thing where we're saying, no, we shouldn't go back to the same places that we know that we like. We should be trying more places because there's so much food and drink in Denver. Let's go to a new place. And I think that after 5 months of being here, that is part of the reason why we're struggling to feel settled. Of course, there are other major factors, like we've been traveling a lot. We're not here at the same time as often. Like we have not spent 5 months together here in this apartment in 5 months. However, I think that this strategy of habit, not even talking about like wake up and meditate or brush your teeth, not that kind of habit, but where you go and who you see, building that familiarity in your environment allows you to feel a little bit more at ease and a little bit more at home.
Totally.
Well, I'm thinking, what would I ask someone who just came back from a 3-week vacation, right?
Okay, sure.
So one that comes up for me is I feel like in the grind culture that we're in, generally people come back from a long vacation either feeling ultra inspired to get back to work or feeling like, I actually hate my job. What the fuck am I doing with my life? So my question would be, how did that reset affect how you're coming back and the life that you're coming back to.
So Sam has almost a full-time job, and I, do wedding photography as my primary full-time job, and then we're doing this, and I think what it did for us is like we got back, and we realized that life is short, and that we really want to just do things that we're passionate about, and I think that we're complete opposites, but this is the thing that like not even compromise isn't a good word. This is like this is the thing that we agree on, that we know that we're really passionate about. And so we're like, we want to go all in on the podcast, like we're we want to spend all of our time doing this. And so I don't know that had we not gone to Europe, I don't know if that would be the case.
Sure.
And so still, I still plan on doing, I still have weddings next year. I still have several this year. And I think there's so many ways to do one thing, right? So like I can still change the way I operate this business so that I do less weddings while still doing them, making time for them, and also making space for this. And for you, it looks a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I also think we leveraged this trip to basically soft launch our social media for something more human. And even though we're not a travel podcast and this content up front is very travel related, I feel like by the end of our trip, correct me if I'm wrong, it was kind of starting to feel like, okay, this is cool, but there is real, tangible, impactful things that we could be working on. And I felt like I could stay on that trip forever because I was grounded in making the videos each day, thinking about the captions, thinking forward to other things that we could post about. How can we relate to other people? What are topics that people like? What kind of like raw shit can we get into about this particular trip, about our relationship, spending this much time together, being in a foreign country, being inspired? Like, I was really feeling a lot of creativity and inspiration. So coming back, it feels very much like one of those medieval torture machines where they're like stretching you until you like disassemble like a doll. That's definitely how I feel between juggling someone else's, organization, my own business, this as a business, and feeling that fire lit under my ass, balancing that with needing rest and not burning myself out.
By the way, disassemble like a doll is something that you would say because that's so PG. When in reality, it's like
super
guts
gruesome.
and blood would be everywhere, dude. So I appreciate that. It wasn't as impactful thinking about the way that you said it. And then I thought about Braveheart. Have you seen Braveheart? No. They like stretch him, but he just like dislocates like both legs and arms, and then he refuses to basically give in and pledges allegiance to the powers that be, and they don't show up, but they basically gut him in front of everybody.
If you were curious about what an average conversation between us looks like, it's Elliot saying, "Have you seen this movie?" And it's me saying, "No." And then it's Elliot giving me some kind of relevant snippet.
You wouldn't, yeah. And I do that because you wouldn't even watch Braveheart. It's too violent. But also in that movie, the camera's like, I don't even know, probably like 200-300 yards away, and all the men have, God, what are they called? Help me.
Loincloths.
No, they like the skirts. What are the skirts called?
Kilts.
They have kilts, and like they all flash the enemy.
Ooh.
But like you can like
see dick?
Like it's mostly hair, right? But it's so far away that you can't really see wieners.
What's the point of that? To distract them?
It's interesting. I don't know. It's just I thought you were asking me what the point of me telling you this. I was like, there's no point.
Oh.
But it's crazy that they showed like 1 million wieners in a movie in the 90s.
Yeah.
Or I think it was the 90s. Yeah. Back to topic. I think, and also this is interesting because like we're having friends visiting in from Denver or in from Albuquerque, and they're also sort of on the same page that we are right now, which is kind of interesting. At least one of them is. And it almost feels like, I don't want to say COVID part 2, where people sort of, they weren't working, they were at home, and the story, and they decided like, this is the thing I want to do, not this other thing I've been doing just to make money and get by and not be happy.
The Great Resignation.
We're kind of like, we're going to do what it takes to make it work. And of course, it's easier said than done, right? Because we need money to live. Like we need money to rent this apartment. We need money to feed ourselves. And this sweet little girl that you can't see off camera sleeping. But
our dog.
But we did, yes, our dog, not a child yet.
No.
But yeah, it's like you just there's like this power, right? Like before, it's like no, I have to do this thing or else like I'll be destitute. And it's like no, like we're gonna this is what we want to do. Like our life is short. Like we want to make this podcast together. We feel like it has a lot of promise and potential, and we really just like want to help our friends and like people who listen to it. And like we have this is what we want to do. And it's like we're just gonna make it work. If that means I have to get a job at Starbucks or I don't know why I even said Starbucks at a local coffee shop, which would be sick. Like if you had to get a job doing the same thing just so we could have more time to do this, like that's what we would do.
Yeah, I
But like
think
we don't. Yeah.
it's very much related to fulfillment, right? And fulfillment is not just doing the things that we want to do, which only impact us, right? Like we could just travel forever, never post anything, never tell anyone about it, only hang out with each other. And that would be fun for probably 2.5 weeks. And then we would need a major break. But it's this idea of how do we actually impact other people's lives in a way that's positive in a world that's just really easy to see the negative, see the downside, be grumpy, be influenced by all of this negativity. Like, how do we, yes, life does have downsides and shit hits the fan sometimes and things can be difficult. But what is a way that we actually tangibly impact people in a positive way on a large scale?
Yeah.
And I think we can agree that this is our way of doing it. And so if we don't go all in on this, will we ever be happy and fully fulfilled?
Right. And there's only one way to know.
Yeah.
So, speaking of negativity, I think it'd be maybe a good time to talk about kind of like some of the hard parts about the trip.
So we did a little math. We took a 3-week trip. We spent 528-ish hours together. And that includes sleeping in the same bed, eating all of our meals together, traveling. I think there was one time that you went into our hotel lobby. But aside from that, we did not spend a moment apart. And I love that because I love you and I love how much time we can spend together. But actually in our day-to-day, although we spend significantly more than the average couple together, we do actually have time apart where you go off to a coffee shop and do deep work. I'm here in our office doing deep work, and we are separate and have stuff to catch up on at the end of the day. So yes, this was a 3-week trip, and also this was over 500 hours spent together. So what are some of the challenges that we faced, Elliot?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to obviously we'll bring up, the thing that we said we'd bring up, which is the meltdown I had in driving in Paris. But I was even just thinking about like more, of course, me existentially or philosophically, like I'm trying to remember where you were talking about like negativity, but like you think like when you're on a 3-week trip that everything is going to be like kosher. And of course, you'll run into like, maybe problems at the airport or whatever it may be. But problems with credit cards not working. But I realized I was like very negative on the trip. And you realize that more when you're in a foreign place, right? When you're supposed to be like having a good time and like there's all this negativity like flooding your brain. I just realized that I was very negative like a lot of the time and I was fighting that negativity. And so I think it caused me to be like even more introspective than I normally am and realize that like I have control over those things to a degree, right? Like the reason that my brain is like stuck on this loop of negativity is because I'm consuming, negative news so much. And we had a pretty deep discussion about that last night. So there has to be balance, right? But my point is that the trip did so many things, but also highlights like your pattern of thinking, and it highlighted that for me. And I realized like that those things are, controllable, and that you've told me, you need to work on being more present. And I think the moments that I was able to do that, like I had a much better time instead of like worrying about the future or thinking about the past. Like I was able to have a better time by just being like, I know that in a month I'll feel a certain way, and in a year I'll feel a certain way, and in a decade I'll look back on this trip with longing and like, wow, we got to spend 3 weeks in Europe. That's a beautiful thing. And hopefully I'll forget some of those like negative moments I had. But I appreciate that about the trip because I feel like it really opened me up to see like if you can't have a good time, if you're going to be negative on this kind of journey, like, there's work to do. And so I appreciate that, but I know that you want to talk about the Paris debacle. So
Well, let me pull out what you're saying. 2 things. 1, Your shit will follow you. It doesn't magically melt away if you take a vacation, you take time off, whether it's deeply planned, whether it's surprise or serendipitous. Shit just follows you because that is part of your patterning. And the other thing I'm hearing from you is the practice of presence has a lot to do with how you feel overall, whether it's positive, negative, happy, enjoyment. You're really good at enjoying those things as part of the experience of nostalgia, but doing it in the moment, I think, is more of a challenge. And I would guess a challenge for a lot of people. Presence of mind is way easier said than done.
It's definitely true, especially for me. Speaking of shit melting away, remember the toilet that you were at? Was it in Paris? Yeah. Where like literally like it wasn't, it didn't flush. It was a conveyor belt. Like you literally shat on or pissed on a conveyor belt that just like cycled your poop off into the unknown. And I thought that was, I can't say if it's genius, if it's like a pure like ingenuity, if it's like really smart or not. I mean, they're not using water, but I would assume somewhere there has to be some water being used anyway.
Well, I did not shit in that specific toilet, so I can't attest to how ingenious it is for the poop conveyor belt, yes. But for the little bit of toilet paper and pee that I did, yeah. It seemed like it was eco-friendly and incredibly entertaining. Speaking of shit melting away, do you want to...
Speaking of shit melting away, yeah, shit definitely doesn't melt away, and I'm just trying to think about how to go about talking about it. So the story is that as soon as we got to Paris, we decided like I wanted to do a D-Day tour. I wanted to spend some time in northern France. So we got a rental right away from the airport. Straight from the airport, we took a 3-hour drive in a standard car to northern France, which it seemed like it was going to be a bad idea, but I had such a good time driving in Europe. I mean, it was the first time, so I was a little bit nervous, but that was so much fun. I think that's like actually one of my favorite parts of the trip is just driving to Northern Europe. So anyway, we spent a day and a half in Northern France, and we wanted to return the car, not at the same place. We didn't want to return it to the airport. We wanted to return it somewhere close to our hotel. So we found a Hertz that was close to the hotel. So we drove 4 hours back to Paris the next day, or 2 days later, and we were going to drop the car off at Hertz. Long story short, it was almost impossible to find, and if you've been to Paris, I mean, the driving there are no rules. It doesn't seem like anybody's following any of the rules. I didn't see any police. I mean, it was absolute chaos. Driving in Paris was absolute chaos. So I was really stressed out. We missed this. We had a timeline that we had to drop the car off by. We missed it. We were really stressed out. We kept missing we kept missing a turn and having to go on a one-way. We showed up to the address, couldn't find the place. And so basically I had a meltdown. And Sam and I shouted at each other for, a couple minutes, and, we're not having a good time at all our first day in Paris.
Well, let me just color the situation a little bit.
Okay. Color it?
Yes.
Okay. Color it with shit. Smear the shit.
So Elliot's driving. I'm trying to navigate. There's an address on our receipt for the Hertz that we're returning the car to. Google Maps wants to take us left, but you can only turn right because there's a giant median. So we have to go around. We spend easily 6-7 minutes going all the way around.
Longer than that, probably.
It's very stressful. We also don't speak French. Yeah, we're feeling rushed. We don't speak French. It takes us back to the exact same place. We don't see the sign for Hertz. We end up getting on the right road. We're passing the address. We don't see a sign. This is just like basically Union Station where all of the trains come. And we're like...
It's packed. It's busy as hell.
We can't see the sign, and it looks like this is wrong. So I pull out our receipt. In the tiniest little letters, it says, return to, and it's a different address. Luckily, the address is like the next block. So we go over there. We do the same dance. We can't find it. So I'm looking at the map. I'm telling Elliot, okay, we need to go back on that road. And Elliot is telling me, no, Sam, we were just on that road. And I'm like, no, Elliot, we were on a different road looking for a different address. We have to go back to this road. And Elliot's like, okay, I'm pulling over. This place doesn't exist. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What, like freaking out. Like, imagine me yelling. What are we going to do? So I have a thought for a moment. What if this Hertz actually doesn't exist? And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to push that down and away. and let's just try one more time to go back to this address. So I convince Elliot that we have to go back. So I'm like, drive really slow. We're driving really slow. I'm looking around.
We do end up going back to the same place that I said that we had been. This is me trying to save face. I was right in that part, but Sam was right that we should have gone back to that area because...
Well, so there's this moment where I'm like, okay, hold on. It's like, stop driving. There's no one around. We're basically in an alley. It almost looks on the map like it's the place to our right, which is this huge construction site. I don't know if you saw that, but I have another thought for a moment, which is like, oh my God.
Church is gone, demolished.
Yes, the place that we're supposed to be returning the car is this active construction site, which is taken down to the foundation. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, okay, let me just look the other way and see. In like a 4-inch by 4-inch square.
Literally like this big. 3 by like an index card, smaller than an index card, in faint yellow.
There's a tiny
like
sign.
15 feet up on a sign.
A tiny little sign amongst lots of other signs to the entrance of a parking garage. So it actually goes underground. The moral of the story is we find it. But Elliot absolutely loses his mind while I'm trying to be as solutions oriented as possible in this incredibly stressful situation. We're in a foreign country. We don't speak the language. We're running late. What happened after that? What did you learn from that? This is like day 3 or 4 of our trip.
Well, I mean, I learned that I have anger issues. I've known that. So then we had to walk probably like 20 minutes to the hotel. And, you know, Paris is kind of special because we'll talk about travel hacking on maybe a different episode or something.
We'll talk about it at the end.
We'll figure it out. But, you know, Sam did a really good job. Sam like got deep into the rabbit hole of travel hacking, and we were able to like, you know, do some really cool things on this trip because of, you know, the points that we had accrued, you know, with our credit cards over time. And so we had a really nice hotel in Paris. And, you know, it was kind of spoiled. Like the first night was spoiled out. You know, we had dinner. I forgot what the place was called. And the dinner was terrible. Like we didn't really talk at all. You know, if you've seen those couples that like are just looking past each other and you kind of get sad, even though you don't know any context. But anyway, it looks sad. Well, ours was sad. Like we just weren't really talking and it was depressing. Our food was fine. But anyway, so we kept walking and I remember seeing the moon, and the moon was beautiful and you pointed it out. And I just still felt like, wow, that moment right there could have been like so powerful. And it's not because we got in a fight. So anyway, show up to the hotel. I know that we need our space. So I go down to the lobby to get some work done. I needed to get some work done on the computer. And I was like, this is a time to, you know, to write out what I'd like to say to Sam. And I decided that I would write something after her and text her. And, you know, I'm sure maybe some people might say that's cowardly, but I wanted a chance to say exactly how I felt without tripping up or without like, not that you would interrupt me, but that's kind of how things go, right? Like when you write a letter, you give someone a chance to read all of what you have to say, you know? So I did that. And then, you know, we proceeded to have a really good day the next day, but I don't know if I can even say what it is I learned. I think that I learned that, you know, I still have a long way to go, and that breathing is like super important. And I really honestly think that if I would have remembered to like breathe, like think about my breath, I think it's like so critical. Like people don't realize, like I was one of those persons like 6 months ago or a year ago, maybe longer, that thought like that doesn't solve anything. Like breathing slowly and counting your breath like is, you know, it's not going to change. Have reacted a lot differently. Maybe that's not really. Sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna push back on you.
It might not be very powerful to talk about in the episode. Like, oh, you learned that if you just breathe better. But I really feel like I remember thinking about that. Like, if I would have just fucking breathed and thought about my breath, like it would have just right away like taken me down a notch. And I didn't do that. I just freaked out.
Okay, I'm gonna push back on you because I do recall saying multiple times,
take a breath.
Can you just take a deep breath?
I obviously could not.
Is that the equivalent of saying, you know, like, calm down to somebody?
I think that, yeah, I mean, yeah, in that like limited scope of my brain's operation capacity or ability to be a normal human fucking being, yeah, like to me that's like, you know, just chill out, like relax. It's like that's the last thing you want to hear, right? Even if it's true, like, but you actually probably meant like, yo, like literally,
like, yeah, actually
just
take
like
a breath.
But maybe if you would have said, I'm not saying that it's your fault, obviously, but maybe if you would have said something like, you know, like put your hand on me and said, hey, can you just can you like count your in breath to 4 and out? And I know that sounds like so corny, but it would have worked. Like that shit works. And that's presence of mind. Like that comes back to presence of mind.
Sure.
Like I was so caught up in my thoughts. Like if I would have been more present, probably would have worked out. You know?
Yeah, so that did a little damage. That was not fun at all.
Mm-hmm.
I was very hurt by how you handled that situation. And I asked you to make it up to me. And you were kind of upset later on that I was trying to hold you to that.
Well, I feel like, I mean, I guess we really haven't talked about it much, but it almost feels like, not that I expect you to, like, oh, you should, you know, we're married and like we're in love, and like you should forgive me, like no matter what, like you should just swallow it and get over it. It's like, of course I don't expect that, but you know, of course I was, you know, I was definitely sorry, and that was the last thing that I certainly wanted to happen. Like I didn't want to have, you know, a tainted experience in any of Europe. But also that's like, when someone says that, I'm like, what is it that I should do? And I think, I don't want to like paint all women the same, but I feel like I've heard this so many times, especially like from friends. It's like that if you told us, that would be better. Like there would be some guidance there. But like women are saying like, we shouldn't have to tell you, like you should just know. And for me, I'm like, does that mean like, should I go get flowers? Like, do I just be even kinder? Do I like kiss you more? But wait, you probably don't want kisses. So like, because you're not in the mood, like, or do I like touch you more? Do I like get in bed with you and just hold your hand and like cuddle with you for the night? And then I'm like, okay, well, like, but she probably doesn't want that because she's upset with me. So like, what do I do? So my brain's just like, okay, what, like that to me, that sounds like almost like a puzzle. Like what is it? Because I know that there's going to be something that I do that you don't want. So that must mean that there is something that you want specifically. And if there is, like, I would like to know what it is so I could just like give it to you so that you could see that I'm capable of giving it to you.
Sure.
You know?
I see what you're saying around this like cryptic unraveling of what is the thing that I should do. And I want my spouse to be clear with me, right? I see that perspective. And I also, in very specifically the context of our marriage, there are very often times where I need you to help me.
Initiative.
Yes, to help me relieve workload. That includes mental load. So asking your spouse questions like, what can I do? What do you need? Actually creates more mental work for them. And the point for me in that specific situation was we spent all of this time and money to take this beautiful trip. The thing I was looking most forward to was spending all of this uninterrupted time together. Mm-hmm. And what I'm asking you to do is take the initiative to figure out how to make it up to me, because you've spoiled it. And right. I don't want, of course I'm going to forgive you because I love you. And of course I'm going to forgive you because I want to have a good rest of our trip. But there's something that I need from you. We've been married almost 5 years. So my expectation is that you understand in the context of our specific relationship, mm-hmm. the things that I really enjoy and really appreciate from you. Also, because in our day-to-day, I, as your wife, try to reinforce that, right? If you make me coffee, I tell you how much I appreciate it and love that you did that for me. Right. If you wear a certain outfit, I tell you how good you look and how much I like that outfit. Mm-hmm. If you make the bed, I let you know that I appreciated it. So I'm also doing the work in the day-to-day to seed for you the things that I really enjoy and appreciate. So after 5 years, my expectation is that when you fuck up, right. you are able to pull from those moments and that vault of knowledge to make it up. Do you know what I mean? Like, sure. If we came home from our trip and for a week you made coffee for me, I would be so happy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to ask, because it's not, I mean, obviously it's not cryptic, but like to me that's a passive aggressive way of like saying like, this is what I want you to do. Like the getting up and making coffee thing. Isn't that the same thing as me basically saying, I would like it if you would stay up later past 9:30 or 10 and watch this, you know, live set of this band I really like every day, or like two or three times a week. It would be nice if you would stay up past your bedtime or wake up, you know, maybe an hour after you go to bed to do this thing with me that I really like doing. That would mean a lot to me. Isn't that kind of the same thing as you telling me that I should wake up? Like, I'm not a morning person, but you're saying like you should get up early for me.
That's just an example. I'm not saying that is the thing that you have to do.
Well, it's one of them that you talk about a lot and that you have harped on a lot. Like, I would really like if you make me coffee, but do you not think it's the same thing? Like telling me like you should get up early for me to make coffee when you don't get up early in general. That's like me saying you should stay up later because that's what I want, because like I do these things at night and I like these things and it'd be cool if you do them with me, but you don't. Is that not the same thing?
I think it's a little bit different.
I'm just asking you, yes or no is not the same thing. Yes or no?
I don't think it's the same.
Okay, now explain.
Because coming home, you generally, I would say your like sleep rhythm is like midnight to 9 a.m., something like that. But coming back.
But we're not talking about coming back. This is coming back has been a week in our marriage. I'm talking about like our entire marriage.
I'm just saying there was a window coming home where you were waking up at 7 a.m. that you could have capitalized on that.
3 or 4 days. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like overall in general. This isn't the first time that you've said this. This is the 10th time you said this. Like it would be, and I have done it very few times. We woke up and made you a pour over. So I'm not talking about the first few days that I came back and woke up at 7, which by the way, I mean, I was basically gone those next few days. I was in Albuquerque. I'm saying overall, not the last few days. I'm saying overall in our marriage. Mm-hmm. And you're saying it's not the same because you've been waking up early. So you're just trying to make an excuse, basically, is what it sounds like to me. To me, it sounds like you're trying to say that it's not the same at all. And here's why. But it's not a good enough reason because you're talking about the last week of our marriage and not the last 5 years or 7 years.
Okay. I guess I'm just seeing like there's always room for compromise, right? So if you asked me, it would really mean a lot if we could spend time watching live sets of bands on YouTube, like several times a week or 20 minutes a day.
Past your bedtime. And maybe an hour or two past your bedtime.
I would say no, 10 is really when I need to start being in bed. But like, what if we did it after dinner?
That's not the same thing, though. That's not the same thing.
Is it only meaningful to you
thing.
if it happens after 10 p.m.?
No, I'm saying that's not the same comparison because you only drink coffee at a certain time.
Right, but I'm saying
you are asking me to get up. You're asking me to break my sleep schedule just to make you coffee, which, sure, some people might be like, you should do that.
Can I finish?
And then, hold on. And it's the same thing as me asking you to break your sleep schedule to do something for me that I like that you never do because you like to go to bed early. And that's fine. But like, I mean, to me, that's the same comparison, but you still don't agree.
I think that you're seeing it as like I am very firm on this one thing means the most in the hierarchy of things that I want.
I'm not saying that.
Okay, well, I'm saying that if you asked me to do this after 10 o'clock, because I'm so firm about my sleep schedule, I would say no. Mm-hmm. And also, because I'm so firm on my sleep schedule, I would understand if you're saying, I don't want to or don't have the capacity to change my sleep schedule in order to do this specific thing for you, like wake up early and make you coffee. But
there's something else that could be done.
I know that there are other things which would help you or make you feel loved or relieve the load of the day for you or make things easier on you that you could do during your normal waking hours. Like, I think that
now here's me.
This is what I'm talking about initiative is like, there are some things that you just don't want to do for whatever reason, and you have to weigh those against other things, right? So for me, sleep is a huge priority, and so is it for you. So the things which would require you to break your sleep schedule now just shift down the list. What is the next thing that you're like, I don't love doing this, but I could do it for Sam during my waking hours? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm literally trying to think about that right now.
It's like, I think it's initiative and creativity and being thoughtful about I think it's back to this presence of mind, right? Like, we spend 20 hours in 24 hours a day together. Like, how often realistically do we spend every single day? Have that presence of mind of the small things in life where we take a moment and say, I'm so grateful for this out loud, or I really appreciate this. Do you know what I mean? Or even if you don't know, like, just spend the next week challenging yourself to have the presence for those things. It's not about the specific task of wake up early and make me coffee.
Right.
It's about the knowing of me and the initiative to do it.
Right.
That matters. Okay, so we took to the internet, as we did, soft launching this trip, and said, if you don't have a meltdown on an international trip, did you even go on vacation? And we got a couple of fun responses, and I just want to read them to you because we enjoyed them, and we know that you will enjoy them. We'll be reading these to you anonymously. Yes, we asked the people if we could share them, so there's that. One of our friends was simultaneously on her honeymoon in Europe, and she said, can't even count how many times we have had meltdowns this trip. We said, let's put to the test how much we're willing to forgive for the sake of having fun. So what inspired me from that is, can we take that sense home with us? How much can we forgive for the sake of having fun? And I think as we grow older, fun is just something we lose sight of or deprioritize. And I really don't want to be that way. And I think that we have gotten pretty good at prioritizing some of these things, which we just consider fun, like putt-putt or bowling or, I don't know, I mean, drinking beer, but that's fun for everybody, mostly if you drink alcohol. Another fun story shared with us. Earlier this year, we had some friends take a trip across Europe and I think a little bit in Africa. And they said, oh no, not myself, but my spouse and his mom and sister absolutely almost wanted to kill each other, lost in the streets of Paris because we mixed the blocks up. And my spouse's mom's backpack was literally a brick everybody had to carry, even though we all told her not to pack like that. It was also uphill. There were so many tears from all of us. It's all humor now and funny to laugh at when we look back, but we were varying levels of exhausted and just literally losing our fucking minds on one another while trekking uphill a few blocks away from our Airbnb. Good times, though. And I think people don't talk about the downsides of going on trips. And a few things I learned, and I want to say, are shit will hit the fan in some capacity. Travel is stressful. So whatever you can do ahead of time to know and prepare, like you're saying, I wish I would have just remembered breathing. Like, if you need to write on a sticky note your favorite breathing exercise and put it in your pocket, or put it on a widget on the homepage of your phone, like anything you can do to set yourself up for success, knowing that you will be in a situation that is unpredictable, will be best.
Smart.
But I also think those really stressful down moments make those high moments feel even more high. And being in unexpected situations together ultimately builds our bond, right? Like this conversation that we're having now, we will be better for it, even though in the moment that sucked so much.
Yeah, for sure. This is also a great way to maintain accountability, because like these things are set in stone, right? Like they're recorded, like they exist, on the internet for people to see, and for us included, obviously. So I'm like, okay, like for this next week until we create a new podcast episode, like could I think about the one thing or the things that I could do, that would make your life easier, or that would show you that initiative, right? And then I'm like, is there like some sort of like, and for you too, like same thing for you, like is there something that you could do? And then like, is there something that we could like challenge our audience to do? But I mean, we'll probably cut this out, but I'm just kind of thinking aloud since we're on the subject. Like, how could we turn this into like a chance for the audience to interact and to contribute?
Yeah, I think that it also, one step in this challenge could be literally having the conversation with your spouse, because early in our marriage, we would have moments where we would say, well, this is how I show you I love you. I do all of these things all the time. And the other person says, but that's not how I receive love, right? Like if I say, but I put the dishes away and I made the bed and I did your laundry and I worked really hard and I did this. If I say all of those things and that's not how you receive love, it's a mismatched effort and receive. So you need to be first and foremost aligned with your partner, A, on how they receive love, and B, how your partner shows love. Because it's not only about you showing me love in the exact way that I want to receive love. But it's also about me understanding that some of the gestures that you do, which are outside of my primary love languages, are you showing me love in your love language. And
about the love language, which we had like really never even delved into, before we got engaged, which was very soon in 5 months. But I feel like that maybe I don't remember well enough, but I feel like the book didn't really talk about that part. Like obviously you do need to identify how your partner, receives love. Like what is their love language and how can you give them that love, while also like how can they know that some of the things that they do maybe you don't resonate with as much, but you do because you realize that is the way that they show love, right? And I feel like that second part's not really talked about as much. And I'm trying to think about how that even relates in our marriage. Like how do the both of us show each other we love each other in the ways that we show love,
I mean,
that we don't reciprocate as much because that's not how we receive love.
yeah, I mean, I think a quick example is just I feel like I know that I need initiative and help from you in just making day-to-day things easier between work and house and entrepreneurship and all the things. So I try and do those things for you, but that is not necessarily how you receive love. Your primary love language is words of affirmation. So when we were early in our marriage, I would say, well, what are you talking about? Look at all of these things that I did for you to make your life easier. And you're like, that's great, but I didn't ask you to do that. I would rather you spend your energy doing this, which is how I receive love. So now I really try and balance affirming out to you, like, you look so cute today. I love like your eyes in this light right now. And I really identifying those moments for myself, saying them out loud to you because I love you and I want you to know that I'm thinking that. And I know that's your primary love language.
Right.
Plus the ways that I like to show love, which are doing things for you. You know what I mean?
And kissing and holding hands.
Yeah. I just want to hit on two more things before we formally wrap up. I mentioned that we kind of soft launched our social media for something more human on this trip, and reflecting on a couple of the lessons of the last month, spending 500 hours together, distilling them out. One of them has been your shit follows you everywhere. So if you can prepare ahead of time for stressful moments, that's something that you can do in everyday life, right? If you're traveling to a new city, if you're moving, if you're doing something unfamiliar, if you're feeling anxious that day, knowing yourself and having some forethought that things might get a little stressful and preparing yourself ahead of time, I think is a huge strategy that we're walking away with. Another one is inspired by our friend's story. How much can we push ourselves to forgive for the sake of having fun? And I think a lot of that is ego, right? Like the reason that you don't want to forgive sometimes is because you want to be right or you want the person to apologize. And in intimate relationships and romantic partnerships especially, you're a team. And there's no, like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day if I was right and you were wrong or you were right and I was wrong. What matters at the end of the day is that we can come back together and operate as a team because it's not you versus me.
Right.
The last one for me, as we think about soft launching the podcast on social media, all the complications that come with that, right? Can we agree on the video? Can we agree on the music? Can we agree on the caption? How do we create it? What's meaningful? Taking imperfect action as just the fortune cookie of this phase of life, I think has been something that we're going to cling to really hard moving forward, especially as the full-fledged podcast gets launched. And just in life, right? Like even talking about making it up to me or when you want to go that extra mile for your partner, imperfect action is always going to be better than no action. Even in your gym routine, right? Imperfect action is always better than no action. Even with water intake or nutrition, imperfect action is going to be better than no action. And just really embodying that instead of this dichotomy of don't do it or do it and it has to be perfect.
Right. One thing before we go that we actually didn't talk about, wasn't really on our list of notes. That's probably on me, because I felt like some of the things I wanted to talk about were maybe like too heavy, but we didn't really touch on the differences, the major differences that we saw in Europe, and coming back here in Denver, and stark contrast. Very obviously, very quickly, in very many ways. I no need to get into detail, but like we just, obviously the air is different. The air is different anywhere you go, especially on vacation. Of course, there's bias right there because you're on vacation, so everything is greener. But now that like we're having some minor issues in the apartment complex, I realized that like there's strength in numbers, and even though the apartment community may be very small, like it always starts with one person to make a change, right? For lack of a better explanation. So the point I'm trying to make is like, can we change America? Like, no, this podcast can't really do that specifically, but like the way that we communicate, our intentionality with communication with the people that are close to us, specifically talking about this apartment complex, like things can happen. Like we can move the ball forward with intentional communication, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't really know where I'm going with that. We didn't touch on that at all. And I kind of wanted to talk about like the differences between America and Europe, and how like we can't change these big societal issues, but like how can we practice at least doing that on a person to person scale. In our interview with Kay and Mel, they had both been to Vienna, and we talked a little bit about like phone culture, like for a small example, and how it seemed to them like less people are on their phones, and just seemed to be enjoying the moment more, and more like discussion with each other. And that was instantly something that I realized, like even in Paris, like, and there's so many people in Paris, but I feel like I saw phones so much less,
Yeah.
There were, and who knows if that's, I don't know, who knows if that's, if that's the case, or if it's just my mind, but I feel like that's something that we both noticed.
Well, in place of people just mindlessly scrolling on our phones, I feel like you pointed out to me, oh my gosh, there are so many people reading at this park, or in this library, or at this cafe. Mm-hmm. And that felt novel to us, is to see masses of people just taking themselves on a date and reading. And that was a bit of a testament, I think, to this more slow pace of other countries. Mm-hmm. That is something I think we're really craving, but feels just out of reach for some reason.
Yeah, and so I think that's where I could come back to talking about like the community in our apartment, right? Like there are things that we, with our collective voices, there are things that we can absolutely change, right? Like some of the things that we're not super happy with right now. The only way to change that is to speak, to communicate, right? And so I think like communicating more effectively and intentionally, with the people we hang out with, and being better examples in small ways, like on the phone. Like tomorrow we're going to hang out with a couple friends from the apartment. We're going to go to Vail for Oktoberfest. And it's like, how can I be a better example for them? Like, and be a good time, right? Like if I'm on my phone the entire time, which of course I wouldn't do, like it wouldn't be a good time.
Sure.
But I mean, I might be on my phone a little bit, but instead of maybe being on my phone a little bit, I just challenge myself to not be on my phone at all, to like live in the moment, maybe take my phone out when I want to like, get a video, but that's it, And I think it's small things like that can end up making a change, especially within this community. I think if I did that randomly, obviously, like at a coffee shop and a restaurant, that's not going to hit the same as like doing that in front of the same people consistently.
Sure.
And so I think that's a way to realize that you can affect change in a small place. And I think that's another good part about being in a apartment, is like you're forced close quarters, right? With a neighborhood like when we lived in Albuquerque, we didn't know our neighbors. Mm-mm. Like we knew a couple, and that was it in like 3 years, right? And here it's like we know 15, 20, 25 people just from running into them all the time. And we made friends with a lot of them. So that's going to be another challenge for me, is to just be a good example in that way. And for myself, like just to be, present. And when we speak with these people about, these certain topics, that we just do so with intention,
Yeah, I think a challenge that we give ourselves pretty often is being a good example. How do we lead by example in our marriage? How do we lead by example in our friendships? How do we act with more love and care and presence and candor and vulnerability and all of these things which we value as traits very, very highly, that we want to see more of in our friends and in the world, really.
Right.
The final thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit about travel hacking, but that feels a little bit kind of like a stark difference from this very real and honest conversation. So I think instead what I'm going to do is in the description of this podcast, I am not a travel hacking expert. So I'm just going to leave some of the resources that I stick with that keep me up to date on what is happening, how to travel hack, how to 2-player mode credit cards. And if you have questions, I am so down to nerd out anytime. So just shoot us a message, send us a DM, leave a comment, whatever avenue of communication makes the most sense for you. I am always game, but I'll just leave those resources for you to peruse on your own.
Sam and I want to thank you so much for listening to Something More Human. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to support us, there are plenty of no-cost, minimal effort ways you can do so.
For starters, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite listening platform. You can leave us a 5-star review, drop us a comment with a topic you'd like to hear us discuss in an upcoming episode, and you can also keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok. Give us a follow there at Something More Human. Thanks so much.
Thank you.